So I've been away for a little while due to circumstances that for the most part I can't talk about, but I've not long been home from enjoying the wonders that was the Glastonbury Music Festival this year, which had a great time, and I've come back to a little bit of news that I have discovered on the official charts website. Now, due to said circumstances, I haven't been reviewing songs for a little while, plus, to be perfectly honest, there's not been much that I've really wanted to talk about, whether it's because I've not found anything to talk about or whether it's just pure procrastination, mostly the second one. However, I came back to some news, as I said, on the official charts website, where the official singles charts is due to be updated. How? Well, there's going to be an introduction to some new rules in order to shake up the charts. Now, for the more astute of people out there, you will know that the singles charts, particularly over the last couple of years, have been incredibly stagnant. What do I mean by this? Well, if you were to look at the history of the singles charts, particularly over the last few years, you will see that there's been a huge decline in new music achieving the status of reaching number one. I think I did a tweet a few months ago comparing the last few years in terms of songs that were number one during the mid-year point. I think 2014 and 15 saw around 20 songs reach the number one spot, whereas last year I think there was 7 songs that had achieved number one status, and this year around the halfway point 6 songs have achieved number one. Clearly there is a problem here. Well, the official singles charts have seen it their mission in order to try and shake things up, not only to make sure that this kind of thing happens less often, but also for another reason. Over the last few months we have seen certain artists completely and absolutely dominate the singles charts, crushing all competition that comes in their way, and basically rule the roost. Now, these artists include, of course, the likes of Drake, Ed Sheeran, the Chainsmokers, and The Weeknd, as well as many other artists. Well, as I've said before, the OCC have now come up with a method in order to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen. What are these rules? Well, there's been, one of, if not the biggest fundamental change, is that artists are only allowed the 3 most popular songs based on sales and streams alone in order to feature in the official singles charts top 100, mainly to prevent multiple tracks by artists from dominating the singles charts. There's also going to be additional adjustments, which includes the streaming ratio for older tracks, which apparently are well past their peak and in steep prolonged decline, according to this article that I found on the official charts website, which I'll include in the description box. The motivation behind these changes, apparently, is to support new talent, give new hits, and to allow artists whose success on the singles charts over the last couple of years not make that much of an impact, give them a better chance in order to promote their songs and to expose listeners who otherwise wouldn't have heard certain artists a chance to go and scope out their works. Now, this has many pros and cons to it, and I think it's only right to sort of go through these and sort of give my opinion on it. Being somebody who is an avid listener of the singles charts every week, I can see why this would draw some ire, but at the same time, I can see why the OCC have decided to do this. Now, for me, the biggest pro that I can see from this is that it prevents the singles charts from becoming stale. Over the last 2 years, more so than any other year, we have seen certain songs absolutely crush competition and stay at the number one spot for weeks, sometimes even months. Back in the day, if a song managed to accumulate 4 weeks at the number one spot, that was considered a monumental achievement. Now, it's not uncommon to see certain songs break the 6, 7, 8 week barrier. Sometimes, some songs even go up into double figures. See Shape of You by Ed Sheeran and One Dance by Drake as an example. By changing these rules, I think not only is it a good thing because it allows other artists a chance to break into the top 40, But like I said, it also allows other artists who otherwise wouldn't have such success a chance to get onto the top 100, and who knows, maybe after some circulation and after a push, they'll see their songs, which otherwise wouldn't even crack the top 40, let alone the top 100, gain some momentum, and maybe would even get a top 10 single out of it. Who knows? Linked in with the first pro into these changes is, of course, the notion that the singles chart is going to have variety to it. It's not uncommon for every single year to have a certain genre of music dominate. I mean, we've had the dance music genre dominate for so long. Rap has had a snoop in every now and then. Even grime has seen a revitalization, unlike any that I can remember from a single genre. But sometimes this success doesn't necessarily translate well into the singles charts. So this limitation of having 3 songs from a certain artist enter into the top 100 could actually see more people gravitate towards these genres, and therefore give certain artists some recognition and some popularity and some success, and maybe that will translate better into sales for their albums. And finally, I think another pro is that it pushes songs' popularity. Unless you get some sort of massive surge behind a song, I don't really recall many new entries this year having that great deal of success when it comes to their release on a singles charts. More so than not, a single dropped in order to promote a new album. For example, one that pops into my head pretty much immediately was the debut single from Lord's second album. If my memory serves me correct, I think it barely managed to crack the top 30 before kind of petering out a bit. So by changing these rules, what we're going to have is we're going to have certain artists bump up in the singles charts, whereas these old rules would not see that happen. Now, of course, with every pro there comes a con, and in my opinion, I think the number one biggest con is that these rules are not a fair representation of the singles charts. What do I mean by this? Well, if you were to take a certain artist who has 4 songs that over the week have accumulated enough in order to warrant top 40 status, that 4th song is going to be immediately discounted, and as a result other songs will be bumped up in the singles charts, whereas that song wouldn't in actuality garner any sort of recognition at all, which, yeah, it doesn't really seem fair when you think about it. And also, these new rules are bound to have an impact on the year-end charts when that time comes around. It still amazes me to this day whenever I see a year-end release, or a mid-year release for that matter, and I see comments typing in as, well, why isn't this song in here, or why isn't that song in there? In which people still struggle to understand that those lists are based off of sales and not personal opinion. But these new rules, that's going to make that a bit more of an issue, more so than the old rules. I'd like to go back to this paragraph talking about bumping off certain songs that are in a steep, prolonged decline down the singles charts. How is that going to be judged? You know, what would be considered a steep, prolonged decline? Would that be probably 3 spaces, 5 spaces? What if a song garners a lot of popularity and over the course of a few weeks starts slipping down the ladder, and then all of a sudden they take a big drop because a week has come by where a lot of songs get pushed up, or not a lot of new releases get introduced? What happens to said song? Is that automatically going to be bumped off of the top 40? I know the US has some certain rules where a song can only be in the singles chart for a specific amount of time before that gets replaced, which, is a different kettle of fish altogether, but whatever works for Billboard works for them. And also, I have to question this idea of adjusting the streaming ratio. At this moment in time, the streaming ratio, I think, is 1 sale is the equivalent of 150 plays, if I've got that correct. I've read this article numerous times now, and I have not been able to find anything to even suggest what the adjustment is going to translate out to. The full statement says this: an additional adjustment will see the introduction introduction of a new streaming ratio for older tracks which are well past their peak and in steep prolonged decline. Again, who is going to judge this, and what is this peak? What is the peak going to translate out to? And the steep, I've already talked about the steep prolonged decline. Is the peak going to be 5 weeks, 10 weeks? Does the song have to have a specific time in the top 10 before the streaming ratio gets changed? And besides, we've seen songs in the past slip down the rankings, and all of a sudden it takes one play or it takes a certain thing to happen in order for that song to be bumped back up in the rankings again. And what if by that time more songs from a certain artist have creeped up? What's that going to mean for songs that don't perform as well? Overall, though, I can kind of see why the OCC have decided to do this. I mean, I think the singles charts have been in such a horrendous state over the last couple of years that I think some drastic action needs to be done. I'm not too sure whether or not this is the right... Well, actually, when I say that, maybe it's the right thing. I just don't think that the OCC have really done much to sort of explain how this is going to happen. You know, we've got some stats here about how streaming has drastically changed the way that consumers access music, going from 600 million audio streams a week from January last year to 1.2 billion a week today. I mean, the streaming market has absolutely exploded, and I think it is going to continue to explode. And with the wide variety of tracks that can be streamed, the singles charts are going to be perhaps the most unpredictable that they've ever been. You know, it's going to be a change that I think is going to have to be welcomed by listeners. You know, the singles charts have changed drastically over the last few years, you know, going back to a time where physical copies were only taken into account when it came into sales. And then it's funny to think that about a decade ago, downloads would then became a part of sales, and that's how the singles charts became constructed. So, and streaming has undoubtedly affected the way that the singles charts have been constructed over the last 2 years, and now once again a change is going to occur where it will be affected even more now than it was before. You know, it's ludicrous to think that a few years ago the Billboard charts ended up taking YouTube views into a matter, which you guys suffered a lot over the last few years over some tracks. But the way I see it, it's a change that's going to occur, and the changes are going to continue to occur, and who knows? I personally, whilst I don't think it's entirely fair, and I haven't seen any more information that will quell any sort of concerns I have, I think it's a change that is going to have to be welcomed by listeners. I think it's a change that is ultimately going to be good for the singles charts, and hopefully it's going to provide that shake-up that the singles charts has desperately needed over the last couple of years. You know, to kind of put it into perspective, 2014 and 15, you got a new number one hit pretty much nearly every single week, and it was very rare that a song cracked even 3 weeks at number one. In fact, I think in 2015, the song that lasted the most at number one, I think was for about 4 weeks. I can't remember what it was, but, you know, basic research, you'll be able to find it. So, you know, I'm going to be interested to see what's going on. You know, this video isn't called a ramble for nothing. But I'll be interested to hear what you people think. Do you think these changes are going to be good for the singles charts? Do you think that they're going to be bad? You know, depending on what you think, leave your opinions in the comment section below. It'll be interesting to see what other people think. Yeah, I'm back now. I will try and I'll try and get some reviews done. To be honest, I've really struggled to find the motivation, and the last 2 months have been really they've been undescribable. I mean, you know, and depending on how well this video does, and depending on how well it comes off, I may do another one of these ramble videos sometime in the future if I see something that piques my interest in the music world. So yeah, until next time, I'm That Song Review Guy. Thank you for listening. Take care and have a good day.